So we'll start in a few minutes. Uh, Hello, Raj and Jesse. Yeah, we'll start in a few minutes. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Hello, Vrushali and Raj and Jesse. So I think we can get started. Um, so this is our first open source meeting of the year. So we're going to do these meetings on Fridays at this time. We have the GSoC students here and Jesse, and if other people show up, that's okay. Brian will maybe make it occasionally. Morgan may also make it. I'm going to record these and put these on YouTube, and we're going to draw from them. It'll be just like a regular side meeting that we have. So we have our Saturday meetings, and then we have our other meetings during the week that are topical. So this is going to be for our projects and for maybe some topics in open source and topics in either VR or the open source sustainability project. I'll come up with things that may be of interest to us, or we'll have some longer discussions about the projects. So every week you're going to give a progress report, and your progress report is going to be like, I did this week, I'm having this problem, and we're going to talk about the problem to see if it's like something we can address um, in this forum. Uh, the Saturday meetings, I just want to keep kind of to a lot of things. So if we do talk about these projects in the Saturday meeting, it'll be a very brief thing. We'll just have a short sort of stand-up type thing. But I want to, if the technical details I want to deal with in this meeting. And then don't forget, we also have the Slack channel. So that's where you can also do things like debug and ask questions. Although as GSoC scholars, you are the experts at these projects now. So when you're doing something, you're kind of the expert, and you have to give kind of you can go and find things outside the lab, answers. We've had people in the past who have you know uh, started playing with a certain toolbox, and they've gone off and asked different people in the community, the general community at large. Like for example, last year we were doing stuff with agent-based models. We had the NetLogo community, which is sizable, and you can ask questions of those people, and they can give you guide you in some ways, and you can kind of game up potential solutions. So we might discuss those in this meeting. We might also discuss them in the Slack channel. The important thing is that you're engaging with the community resources and that we're getting, sort of the state of the art. We're trying to figure out how to do these, tackle these problems. So I guess we might start with some updates. So if you have updates, if they're just general updates or if they're project specific updates. Oh, you're muted, Raj. Okay.
Yes. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
So I'm just trying to maintain a document for writing the weekly updates. So this week I went through this research paper you guys had written.
Yeah.
On open source sustainability. I read through it completely just to get a gist of what is there in it. I also happened to look at the source grid and get compare those papers. Apart from that, there is this organization called GSoC, which is all about community health and open source sustainability. So they are planning to make a new release in which they are having a dashboard. This is just a demo dashboard, but this is what they are aiming at. One second later. Okay, while this is loading, I also happened to go through this Google Drive for the GSoC meetings.
Oh, yes.
I really like this assets and digital infrastructure session. I read through this Jupyter Lab, and I read the like half of the first chapter in genetic programming.
Yeah.
It did quite interesting to me, so I'll probably keep reading that on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
And apart from that, yeah, I read some blogs. I also published my blog regarding the GSoC selections, and I plan on posting these blogs on a weekly basis. And they all basically blog the whole GSoC journey. So I'm doing it on Medium and Hashnode as well. So I got that done. And
Is this
apart from that, there was this GSoC contributors meeting we had, in which they told us that if any college students, if you all have any examinations or something like that, it is better to inform your mentors beforehand.
Yeah.
So actually, just recently, my fourth semester has begun, and my mid-semester exams will be starting from the 29th May, and it will be up till June 6th or June 7th. I'll try my best not to, that it does not affect my progress report, which I've written in the timeline, but that is just something I wanted to inform you guys beforehand. And okay, so this is loaded. This is the new dashboard that Augur is proposing. So given this is just some sample data, but if a repository is given, it can fetch all this data, all these average added lines, then the average age of open issues, lifespan of merge pull requests, and all that. So I think these are like I personally didn't think of these many metrics while considering sustainability. So this is unleashing more possibilities. So what my plan was is before the coding period officially begins, go through the Augur project of chaos and maybe use that to somehow gain insights and build a base for the project, because that is all about it. The Augur project by chaos is all about health of open source softwares and organizations. So I think if they have solved the problem to some extent, I can just use that as a starting point and maybe build something on top of it.
Yeah, that's a great update. Thank you. So a couple of things. So the first one is yes, thank you for letting us know about exams, and that comes up all the time with, especially in India, they have exams at different times. So that's something you can work around. If you plan, just take your timeline and you shift things around so that you're doing things that are minor during that time, or you can take that time off and just come back to the things later. It's just going to be like a matter of like kind of scheduling around that, and then we'll expect that you won't be at full speed during that week. If you could put those hours or those weeks in the Slack, just so that we know where they are in the timeline.
Yeah, sure. I'll do that after the meeting.
Yeah. Then also, yeah, when you talked about the paper, you talked about those different techniques that are already out there. So that's always good. There are all these competitors. I don't really think of them as competitors. It's just that they've approached this problem in different ways. And so, yeah, we should definitely draw from what they've done if they've done something really well. Now, they're doing things a little bit differently than what we're doing. We're kind of simulating things, and you're able to you want to plug in certain parameters that are realistic. So when you set up an agent-based model, you set up a bunch of agents. You have like a type of model. So it could be all sorts of there are all sorts of different types of models, or like biological models, social models, physics models, and you just pick the model that you think is the best fit for your problem, and then you plug in your parameter values, which means that like your agents may interact at a certain rate. Is it plausible that they act at that rate, or is it implausible? Now, for open source, you're going to have focus questions like contributors are doing these things because they trust each other, or because there's like an incentive to do so, or something like that. And so the three models we have, one is an active inference based model, which is where they're sort of using their minds. They have things in their head, and they're trying to match what other people have in their head, and then that leads you to like more collaboration, or maybe more contributions, etc. Another model is the reinforcement learning model. So in that model, we have basically the agents are using reinforcement learning to sort of bootstrap their involvement in the project. So you have these parameters like, contributor, maintainer, etc. And there are these different categories where basically if you're a contributor, you're pretty casual. But if you become a maintainer, you've done something to make yourself more involved. And so what that is, we don't really know. But we know that we can capture it in this agent-based model, and it gives us, maybe it gives us a prediction to say, if you do this thing, or if you try to aim for a parameter value for cooperation that's rather high, then you can get this result in your community. And so then it's up to the person who's doing this to say, this is how we're going to have, this is how to achieve this level of cooperation. So we're not giving them all the answers necessarily, and neither are any of these other methods. They're just kind of saying that, you can measure your community, measure different things like cooperation. And then what we're doing is we're saying we have an agent-based model or a set of agent-based models that can predict some of these interactions and their outcomes given some parameters. You can take data from, like, say, GitHub, but that's incomplete because we have other places where people are making contributions. Or, and then you also have this issue of, kind of, different communities have different ways of dealing with cooperation. So in some communities, it's a matter of like collaborating on, on watching the same YouTube video. In other communities, it's, contributing to the same repo. Maybe in other communities, it's all collaborating on some paper. So there are all different ways you can measure that. And so it's kind of a problem for us in our models because what input data do you use? But it's also a strength of our approach that, you have these different ways of kind of getting to cooperation, and we can maybe kind of figure out how to, cast our net around all those ways and just say, this goes into this parameter value. Basically, if you're doing these things, and I'm not saying you have to do it that way, but like that's kind of the idea of what we're trying to do and how we position ourselves with respect to those other approaches. But I would definitely use those approaches as like inspiration if you find that to be useful. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, about the blog. So where is that being published?
I published it on Medium and Hashnode.
Okay. So yeah, please, when you post your first post, please post it in the Google Summer of Code channel so we can see it. And then Vrushali, I recommend that you do that as well, though you're not required to. We've done this in past years, and in fact, INCF used to require it, where we would have, like, you'd have to write a weekly blog post. You'd say, okay, this week I did X, Y, and Z. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z next week. This is why this is important, what I did this week, and this is how it fits into the project. If there are like notes about like whether I had to shift the project focus or if I fell behind, you would add that in, just kind of brief overview. We did this for, So we did this for in the DevaWorm project. In some of the DevaWorm projects, we did this a couple years ago, and now we're using those blog posts as documentation for some of the work we're doing this summer. So, as all towards this goal of building this site called DevaLearn. It's a platform for deep learning for microscopy, and we're using it to kind of, give people background on why things are the way they are. So documentation is always tough. You're always writing documentation for things. Some people leave it to the last minute. Other people try to specify everything with documentation. But I would try to find a middle range for that. So, if you're working on your project on a weekly basis, you might write a blog post. You might also keep notes about like what you did, the types of tools you use, the challenges, and then you can turn that into documentation. And in fact, at the end of the project, you're going to have this README or this, thing that you're going to put in your repository that spells out a lot of the challenges that you've had. So, I want you to basically at the end of the project have a README, have some information about how to run the program, how to, why it's important, what you did in the summer, and then also some of these other technical challenges. And that should be, we have some repositories where we have the examples of these, so I'll provide them at a later date, but that's another thing you want to keep in mind. Yes, I think that's good. Thank you for that update. Vrushali, do you have anything to update us on?
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I read the field guide today and the thing you are given in the Slack channel. I have checked that thing. I'm in the middle of the 2 pages of the first chapter, and the next I did was that VR post from LinkedIn, like bunch of to come up with these ideas so I can implement in my GSoC project. The Gamma documentation I read 2, 3. I think that Gamma will be helpful for us because we can implement 3D structures because NetLoco don't have 3D ABM model, so that would be helpful for our project. That's what I think. And the GitHub
Okay.
repo from Gamma.
Okay, so that's good. You're checking out Gamma. Do you think it'll be a sufficient thing to use, or?
Yeah, I think so, because the documentation there given was pretty decent to apply for our model. Yeah. And I'm thinking about to start making Blender projects asset in Blender so I can come up with the ideas better soon.
All right. That sounds good. Yeah, so great. That sounds all good. Again, we're at the beginning of our project, so we still want to keep thinking about how we're actually going to approach the coding period, which starts on the 27th and then goes through the summer. Again, let me know if you have any exams or anything you need to schedule around.
No, I don't have.
Yeah, okay.
I'm done with my exams last month only, and I don't have any exams.
Yeah. Okay, so that's great. And then I think, we have, if we need to, make changes to our projects, like I said, we can rescope them if we need to. But I encourage you not to, because it's kind of hard to get it, finished on time. But yeah, so our coding period starts the 27th. We should have all this sort of stuff in order by then, and we can build up to the, where we really start going then. So that's where the coding is going to start. The rubber hits the road. But yeah, thank you for that, and we'll keep talking about these things coming along, throughout the community period, so we can get these things set in stone. Okay, so this is the community period. This is where we're going to talk about the community that we're in. So we're in what is called the Orthogonal Research and Education Laboratory. And the Orthogonal Research and Education Laboratory, I don't know if Jesse has access to anything. I guess I'll do this next week. I'll talk about kind of going over the history of the lab. Jesse is our our project manager for the lab. He's already taken an interest in building like project management around all sorts of things with respect to procedure and other things. So that's going to be his forte. He'll be coming into the meetings and hopefully showing us some of these things, some of these ways to go about this. And we might talk about it on Saturday as well, so it gives people a broader audience an idea of this. But our lab started. I started in 2014, 2015 as a response to sort of like I couldn't do what I wanted to do like in a normal organization, so I started this, and it was really like one-on-one project, working on projects with people. And then around 2018, we started to work on bigger projects, more coherent or traditional academic projects. We first hosted our first GSoC cohort then, and we have information of that on our website, 2018, 2019, and then 2022, and then this year. So we skipped a couple years where we didn't have GSoC in this organization, but we've in 2019, famously, we had a study group where we did things of develop what we call developmental Bradenberg vehicles, and then last year we did the open source sustainability. So that's all there. We have this on our website, so let me go over some of our resources for the community here. I guess I can share my entire screen here. Okay. So when I mention the website, this is the Weebly website, orthogonal-research at Weebly or .weebly.com. And this gives us this has a lot of good information here. There's a lab introduction, which is something that is, a lot of these things are kind of go off site, but this stitches everything together. So this kind of goes through some of our projects here. We have our Google Summer of Code cohorts. We work through, and I'll talk about this in a minute, through OpenWorm. We have the Data Reuse Initiative, Cognition Futures, Developmental AI, Representational Brains and Phenotypes, URL Lab homepage, and some of these other things here. Data Reuse Initiative, which is more abundant, but so we've done a lot of these different projects. And if you go to these sites, you'll see some of the details. We have a couple other things going on that aren't on this list, but this is basically where we are. We have a lot of projects is the point. And so if you think that there's something you might be interested in learning about, this would be the time to read about it and say, I want to know more about this project. We have a lot of alumni. We have a very distributed organizational structure. So to get involved in the lab is not that hard. The barrier to entry is rather low. You've gotten through our GSoC pathway, which is where you apply and you get this fellowship from Google and you work with us for a summer. We also have interns through the University at Albany in New York State, which is our traditional college students who are doing an internship on some research topic. And in 2022 we had at least 3 or 4 good internship experiences. So that's something we can point to as well. We get people from the areas, things that we're involved with, like Neuromatch Academy and Neuromatch Conference. We occasionally get people who are interested in the lab. They see something that they like and they come contact us. We also have other people come in, they just want to contribute something. So it may be more academic, it may be more technical, but we do engage people at different levels of involvement. So I'm the director of the lab. Jesse's the lab manager, and we have people leading projects like Amanda Nelson, and Brian is in and out of the lab, but he's actually the one who's taken the lead on the open source sustainability thing. So he's been interested in developing that. We're supporters of open science. So we support open science, which is where we do science, where we publish a lot of our things that usually aren't published. So documentation, open code, open papers, meaning that they're open access, they're transparent. We believe in some of these other like computational notebooks and the like. Then our lab vision, which you can find here. So this is all orl-group.github.io. This is all off of this lab introduction part of the main website. Then we have our different projects here, we have links to their websites. So we have websites for different projects. And we have our people. So we have a lot of people, a lot of members and alumni. If you go through here, you'll see many people who've done many things here. Been involved in different ways. So you can check that out. We've done a lot of diverse things in the lab over time. So this is, and then these are our partners. So we have different groups that we work with. Plot Twisters, which is something Jesse's involved with. Reproducibility for everyone. We've been involved in the eLife Ambassadors program and some other things. So that's all there. And the project websites are here, and they kind of go off to different places, but they all get kind of come back together here. So we're involved with the Open Worm Foundation, as I said. There's also the DevaWorm project, which I'll talk about in a minute, or DevaWorm group. NeuroAI, which is representational brains and phenotypes, where we do a lot of agent-based simulation and modeling and theory. Cognition Futures, which is cognitive science flavored. We have these open initiatives, open source, open science. We also have other things in the informatics area. So we have a lot of things going on. Our education tab then gets into some of our Google Summer of Code cohorts. So we've hosted people, in past years on different projects. We also hosted the DevaWorm group, and we've been in the DevaWorm group. We've had a Summer of Code intern for every year since 2017. So every year we've had an intern that's come in and done some work, and it's largely on things like working with the nematode C. elegans and some computational issues surrounding microscopy data or other types of data, and modeling things like lineage trees. So we've done a lot of deep learning in that group and so forth. We have JoPro, which is Jesse's intern organization. They have internships for people who are interested in learning how to mentor people. We're involved in Neuromatch Academy, which is, of course, a summer school for computational neuroscience, and they have one for deep learning. And we get involved with that as well. And you'll see that in the Saturday meetings this summer, especially. We have our Slack teams. We have the Orthogonal Labs Lab. We have Slack. We have the Open Room Slack, which is for the DevaWorm group. Then we have our Discord server. So big unfinished ideas is like educational stuff. And we're also going to host the open source sustainability stuff there as well. JoPro has a Discord. This Principles of Bits to Matter to Mind is the VR Discord. So this will be important for Vrushali. We'll be posting a lot of things in that Discord that are like technical details, new techniques, new interesting things that is going on in that community. And I really want to try to put things in there because it's a nice archival place for things you find. And we'll revisit those in the meetings, I think, as we go along. And then we also do stuff with what they call critical periods. We do computational critical periods. So critical periods is a part of development where the organism learns a lot of things. It's concentrated in time. And so we want to model those computationally. We want to provide insight to agents that use critical periods as a means to learn. So this is the kind of thing we're interested in as well. And then we do a lot of outreach. So we have different types of outreach activities, and you can find more there. So the next thing I want to talk about is the DevaWorm group. So the DevaWorm group is part of the Open Worm Foundation. The goal of the Open Worm Foundation is to model the nematode C. elegans, model all the cells, all the connections in the connectome, a lot of the different parts of the body, so the muscles, and other things. And so we, in DevaWorm group, which I had, were interested in development. So the development of the worm from the fertilized egg to the hatch of the embryo. And then also there are some larval periods in there that are also very interesting. We've done a lot of things with like theoretical biology, computational biology, even some wet lab biology. But with our Google Summer of Code projects, we've largely focused on building deep learning tools and other types of machine learning tools for analyzing data. So there's a lot of microscopy data that needs to be analyzed, you need to figure out like where a cell is, when a cell divides, where its position is, what its precursors were, what its descendants are. You build different types of data structures around that. And you also want to put it into numbers. So the computational aspect is segmenting the images, linking the images in time, and then putting the numbers in a database that you can then query in different ways and build different representations. So that's what the DevoWorm group is. We do a lot of stuff. There's a site. I'll go to the site actually, so that you can see. So this is the I'll go to the OpenWorm Foundation site first. This is the OpenWorm Foundation, and so aside from like modeling the worm, when I say modeling the worm, I mean like computational modeling. They also have a viewer, which they call browser.openworm.org, and I know Vrushali's seen this, but this is the sort of a virtual worm that's been modeled in Blender. They've built a model of every cell and nerve cord things here. So you have like, you can zoom in on it, you can explore it from different angles. And there's an initiative, I know that Caltech is kind of working on an initiative to bring this into VR. I also mentioned that in the projects for VR that we might work on something of a VR representation of this. So bringing the Blender file into a VR setting, like a MetaQuest app or something where you can actually go through this and explore. Because right now you have this on your desktop or your laptop screen, and you may be able to touch it, but you can move it maybe at a couple of degrees of freedom. This is where you have, all the biology. And imagine if you were in VR, you could go through and explore inside of this structure and see things maybe that you didn't see before. You can add in detail with these models. So you can do all sorts of exploration with these models. And doing in VR is more immersive and perhaps more informative and interesting. So that's what OpenWorm does, and they do a lot of things with biophysical modeling. They do a lot of things with movement modeling. What we do is development, and so development is. Let me go back to the DevoWorm group page. Development is the domain of DevoWorm, and this is the DevoWorm website. So this is devoworm.weebly.com. So it's also hosted on Weebly. And we've done a lot of things over the years. We have a lot of activities at different public lectures, and we have weekly meetings that happen on Monday mornings. And we have a lot of those on YouTube, so you can check them out here. We've done a lot of things, not only with C. elegans, but with other organisms like diatoms. And we do some things at Drosophila, axolotl, other model organisms that exist. And we do things with network theory, we do things with graph neural networks, we do things with lineage trees and other types of computational representations. And then we have people in the group that are experts at things. We have kind of a split between kind of like students and casual learners, and then we have people who are experts at like developmental biology and sort of physical biology and imaging, with microscopes. So we have people who know how to image embryos, and we have people who know how to analyze them. So that's how we bring that group together. But we also have other things that we do, networks, of course, this sort of cellular automata modeling, and so forth. So that's all very much, this project has also been going on since 2014. So there's a lot there that we've done. We have a lot of publications. So this DevoWorm has like an academic arm and sort of a applied arm where we're doing a lot of this deep learning and machine learning stuff. But we have a lot of publications here, as we have a lot of publications for the other projects. So this is a lot of stuff, I know, but I just wanted to go through this to make sure you had a sense of what we do and who we are as a community. Another thing you can check out if that's, if you're kind of lost with that or if you need more information is the Open House channel of the Orthogonal Research Lab YouTube channel. So we put this together last year. It was an open house for different projects and the state of the project. So we're going to be updating this. We have all sorts of videos that we've made. So society, ethics, and tech. this project PHASIC, which is physical intelligence and augmented cognition and things like that. And then we have like developmental AI, some of the summer of code stuff. We really, we want to have like multiple ways for people to access the information. So we have videos, we have papers, we have other things. We have digital notebooks, which we've invested a lot in. So those are all things that are very useful to communicating things to people about, what we're doing, because we're doing a lot of stuff. And I always tell people we do a lot of things. We can generate a lot of different types of artifacts for the work we do, but we need to make it understandable to people. We want to be able to get it out there, and hopefully with your projects, we'll be able to do things with them beyond like just the lab. We want to apply them out in the world. We maybe want to get people contributing to some of the things you make, or putting it out at conferences or things like that. So we have this is our YouTube channel for the orthogonal lab, which is different than the YouTube channel for DevoWorm. This is the open house channel, which should tell you some things about like the state of projects. But we also have, like our lab meetings are on here and so forth. So it's definitely, if you want to work asynchronously, if you miss a meeting, depending on the meeting, it's on YouTube, so you can just check it out there. Finally, I want to talk about, do we have any questions at this point, or do we have any comments? No, Jesse hasn't really commented on anything. All right, no questions. All right, good. Yeah, so, okay, you're there.
What's that?
Oh, you're there. I hear you. Yeah, coming on.
Oh, I was just going to say, JoPro is basically an organization I'm making to support a lot of research efforts and also mentoring as well. So it's kind of been slowly building out some other products in the lab in terms of, it's kind of something I'm using to house a little bit of cognition features in the Society Ethics Tech team, but also it's like the mentoring project, or the internship partnership with UAlbany, and I'm going to try to bring some of those things into the Google Summer of Code too, like in terms of professional development and some of the stuff I mentioned. I don't know, in our last sort of Google Summer of Code meeting about the other skills to bring into it, so you have a little more of a rounded experience. So it's a wide-ranging organization with a lot of subproducts underneath it. But yeah, I know that's a lot of information that's been thrown at everybody right now. Like, you're not expected to read every video or watch every video in the open house and give a report on all those things. But it is there if you want to learn more and kind of see how things overlap. And definitely join the Discords, join the Slack channels that are for you, and just a nod to communicate as often as you like, and it will be to your advantage for you to tell us things often, as opposed to us kind of waiting to hear you say things. So consider that a bit of a nudge to do so. And it isn't like, it can even just be, don't worry about having this gigantic, Nobel Prize Turing Award-winning breakthrough to tell us every time. Just kind of stay in touch and say, hey, I was looking at this, or I'm checking this out, and it can be one sentence long, but the more communication, the better. Also, I realized that I didn't. For some reason I couldn't make a channel last time when I tried this, but I'll make a specific channel in Slack for you. You guys can always DM us. You can always put whatever you want in the Google Summer of Code stuff. But if you want a place in Slack to have a little bit more concentrated stuff, I'm going to try to make again the HQ channels, and I'll invite you to them. It's sort of a slightly easier, accessible thing than like a group private message. And it's easier to tag. Like if you want to tag Brian something, you can just add him in there too. 2, whatever. So I'm going to try to set those up again now. But yeah, that's my general comment about things.
Well, thank you, Jesse. So yeah, I agree with Jesse on that about the updates. Don't worry about their substance. Just worry about like kind of every week have something that you've done. And of course, if you're not keeping up with your schedule, will be a problem. But also, like I said, we can rescope things if needed. Just try to like get through things, and if you didn't get through them, why didn't you get through them? Try to be self-critical in that way. Say, I need to do this for that. Don't think that you need to have these set of blinders on and just go through your project schedule and hit a target and say, I either did or I didn't, and I couldn't. The idea of GSoC is to get experience in kind of figuring out how to do projects. So you're going to be trying out some tools in the community period. Part of that is what you have. And then you're going to be applying them in the coding period. And sometimes they'll work and sometimes they won't. So you're going to have maybe 2 alternatives or 3 alternatives to try if you need to. And then you'll be able to come out on the other end with a good project. And, but a lot of that is a progress report saying, this is what I did. One thing I like to tell people is that momentum is important. If you don't try things, you don't have momentum. If you don't have momentum, you can't go anywhere. So you have to just keep going and don't worry about like stopping for a week because you're not sure of something. Just try different things and see where they go. And if none of them work, then we can talk about it. But, really try to keep going. And, you're going to have to just try to be creative in some ways. But that's why we communicate in the Slack and in these meetings, because it's important to have that communication. I don't want you to work for 4 weeks and then go way off on a tangent and end up somewhere where we can't get to you. We can't help you. And so that's another important thing to think about.
I would add on to that a common refrain. I think something that we'll try to repeat often, and not just to be like dogmatic or boring, but just to really put it out there. Bradley mentioned momentum, and I always I'm sure the people said it, but I always quote Bradley, who was the first person to say it to me this way. In general, or even maybe all the time, but whatever qualifier you want, progress is often a lot more. Momentum is a lot more important to focus on than quote unquote progress or the appearance of progress. And like, how do you maintain momentum? It's through the check-ins, it's through the smaller updates, it's through, sometimes it's going to be, and I do this all the time, sometimes there will be check-ins where you're literally saying the same thing you did last week or the last 2 weeks ago. You're on a little tighter Google timeline, so we kind of want to avoid, we have a specific schedule to check out. But sometimes it's going to feel that way. You're not going to be that happy about it, but like, that doesn't really matter. It's mostly just keeping the momentum of your attention on the problems and not being too caught up in the result or the appearance or what the outcome is at this time. So that's something that we really want to encourage, but also like that's a really important, whenever you're doing research or anything that's you're building something new or innovative, like it's a skill, and we want to try to positively reinforce that here.
Very good. Vrushali or Raj, do you have anything to say to that or any questions? Okay, that's good. Yeah, so I mean, this is just our first meeting, so we'll be talking more about these issues as we go along. Don't feel like rushed. I know I dumped a lot on you for the first meeting, but I wanted to give you some sense of what we had in terms of our layout. And then maybe next week, Jesse can like kind of we have a map of different projects and maybe discuss more of the state of some of the, maybe like VR is kind of a thing that we're starting with, that we don't really have a lot of project history. The open source sustainability, for example, we have last year's GSoC, and we'll have to talk about that more, how that fits into a project, So we'll do that next week then. The final thing I wanted to talk about this week, and Raj brought it up, is that I put out a bunch of readings on the Slack, and I kind of threw it out there. And again, it's like a lot of things that are of varying relevance to people, but I'm going to talk about those a little bit more. So one of the goals of the Summer of Code project is to get people not just experience with projects, but experience with open source development. And so the open source aspect is very important. What I have here is, and this is what I put in the Slack as a link to this, is we have a bunch of readings that are kind of all over the place. Some are on licensing, some are working open and together, communities and collaboration. These are just topics that I have notes on, open data. They're very, very cursory notes, so there's more here. I've actually taught, since I put this repository together, I put together a project management course, so I'll be publishing that soon in terms of the lectures and everything. So that's something else you can draw from. So there are various videos in these folders. This is Stephen Larson from OpenWorm about building social systems, understand complex systems, stressing kind of the social aspect of open source projects. Things about, how to build things, how to innovate using open approaches. We have other things like licensing. So you're going to be asked to license, have a license for your software. We always usually pick the MIT license, but learning about that licensing is important because you want to make sure that you don't run into any conflicts when you're building out your software. So to that end, there are a couple of books that you can draw from. And these are the things, these three things down at the bottom. The first thing is this book, Open. And this is the philosophy and practices that are revolutionizing education and science. So this is largely open applied to education and open applied to science and how it's revolutionizing those fields. So it's not directly related to software design, but it does tell you how these things apply to different areas of software engineering, or of like different fields that are allied with software engineering. So we have these, different chapters. You can, like, I don't want you to read these things cover to cover, but I want you to look at them and use them maybe as resources or references when you're going through a project or through the community period. And what I always do with the community period is if you like something, we always have the option to follow up on it. So if you really want to know something about, say, open licensing, we can talk about that more. And that can be part of your experience. If you're interested in opening science, that's another topic that we've actually done work on in the lab. So we have some expertise in that. We have opening up higher education with screencasts, like what we're doing right now. So there are a lot of things that this book is a little old, but it points to some of these things that people have been doing to open research up, open up education, and then also software engineering. And that's kind of where our lab meets together. So this is why this is important. But this gives you some information about this and really about how to develop open source softwares and open source organizations. If you're interested in data science, and many people who do like software engineering through our organization have some interest in data science, we have a field guide to data science, and that goes into some detail on data science and the thinking behind analyzing data. Kind of gives you some background in this. This is more for, I've used this in the DeVorm group to kind of give them a basis for what they're doing with their machine learning. So maybe the two of you won't necessarily find this useful, but this is something that you can learn about data science, about how that fits into, open source development and things like that. This one's a little more relevant, I think. And this is producing open source software, how to run a successful free software project. So this goes into how to basically do what I'm doing or what the OpenWorm Foundation is doing. And you're basically running an organization that's doing this, sort of open source development. You're developing things under open source licenses. You're getting people to contribute to things. You're trying to solve problems of software and then put that out to a wider audience. So this kind of goes through this, you know, how to do this. So it's very practical. Again, choosing a license, setting the tone for like different things in your community, um, maybe revitalizing a project. They give a history of open source software. And I do a lot of that in my project management course too. So this is all kind of parallel to that. The technical infrastructure might be important if you're. I know Vrushali had talked about how she was not exactly familiar with GitHub, and that's something we're going to be doing. I'm going to be setting up repositories towards the coding period, closer to the coding period. Um, I'm going to. We're going to use GitHub. We can use digital notebooks through there. We can do things with, of course, software code. We can do things with documentation. So we can do a lot of things in GitHub. Some of this, of course, there's this book actually in chapter 3. They talk about version control from pages 52 to 62. They talk about the vocabulary, how to use it, how to receive and review contributions. So, these are things that are changing fast, but you get the sense of how to do these things. There's, the social and political infrastructure. You get, the business, nonprofit, or government agency aspect to this. So, yeah, this is all very important. There are these things that are in parallel with this course I taught. So, I'll be putting that up, and that'll be very useful, I think, maybe just as a supplement to what you're doing. So when you're working on your projects, you want to kind of frame it in a larger context, and these things will be helpful for you in your career. So as you move along in your career, you can take these things you've learned with you and perhaps do things, very interesting things in the future. So like I said, we'll go through those readings. So next week, I know Jesse, if you want to do something maybe for 10 minutes on some of the projects, we can do that. I want to go through the laboratory contribution philosophy. I'll try to maybe set up our GitHub repos, before the coding period. So we'll have that and we'll go over that. And maybe a short GitHub tutorial for Vrushali's benefit. Anything else I'm missing?
No, that's good. I'm taking some notes in Notion, and I'll maybe introduce Notion a little bit more in next week too. I don't think we're not going to be using it that much, but just to kind of show on my end part of it there. I do think sort of keeping things in like GitHub issues and using GitHub to project to manage the actual stuff is probably the way to go. And I may try to give a bit of an introduction to. We haven't done a lot in in the virtual reality space. We haven't done a whole lot of concrete things, but like the saying has done some stuff on his own there that's sort of adjacent to some things. We've talked a lot about it. We've had a lot of discussion in the area, even if we haven't put it there. And I'm actually quite interested in the VR project in that I think. It's been a little bit on the back burner the last month or so, but I'm interested in doing a lot more in that space in the future in general. So I might dovetail into a few things in that sort of future leaning sense as well. But yeah, I think that's good. I think I'll have a little bit of a section on I don't know. It'd be nice to go over some. I don't know if we'll give out like a syllabus outside of what's already in the Google Standard and other things, but I think explicitly saying here's like our learning objectives, or some things we really want to emphasize, will be discussed more next week too, and I'll make a few things about that. So yeah, it's a good start today.
That's great. Well, thank you. One more thing I want to mention too, and I did mention this in the introductory emails, is that I would like you to produce like maybe a 15-minute presentation on your project proposals. So this is just going through your proposal and putting things from that into some slides and then presenting them in this group. So maybe in 2 weeks or 3 weeks from today, I'd like to do those. I'd like, I'll remind you, and if you have any questions, you can let me know in the Slack. But I'd like to have those done, done in the meeting. Like we can just go through what was your proposal about.
Yeah, and it's very okay that it's literally the proposal.
Yeah.
Like, it will change, and then kind of the fun of it's going to be just sort of change over time. So don't worry about it being perfect. Don't worry if you don't know all the details, but like the proposal itself, and getting experience how to present the proposal in, I guess it's a little bit more than a flash talk, but sort of like a 10 to 15 minute window. It looks like we're going for.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Yeah. Also, at the end of the project or at the end of the coding period, then I want you to do a follow-up presentation where you change out the slides and you update it as to what you actually did. So some of these things they'll fall by the wayside. Some of these things you'll pick up on and you'll drive them forward. So it'll be very important to have like an update. But you can use those slides. You don't want to have to reinvent the wheel. You want to just like have a comparison before and after, and then we can, that'll show people, that you really did think this through. That there's this iterative process, and so it should work. Okay, thank you for meeting this week. Again, keep in touch in the Slack, and see you next week.
All right, take care, everybody. Happy working with you all, and see you next time.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.